Welcome back to the channel. Today we're ranking Star Wars. If you've been around me, you know I have ranked Star Wars in the past. We're going to do that again today, but I'm doing it just a little bit differently this time. So usually I have these same categories most of the time: story, acting, visuals, entertainment, and I have like a weighted thing for them, and I pre-prepare like this is where they land. But I wanted to do it slightly different. All of these are going to be weighted. 40% goes to story, and then 20% to everything else, because I think the story is the most important element. But what I'm going to do is rank the movies from best to worst instead of ranking them individually on the category. Like, instead of giving this a 9 out of 10 on story, just going to say, where does it rank against the other Star Wars films? That's going to get an aggregate score over here that will go onto this page and figure out where these guys are going to all be ranked against each other. This is going to do two things. One, it's going to give us our ranking because no two movies will be able to have the same score. But two, it will show us a better idea of how far of a gap there is between each film without me just assigning that gap arbitrarily. So obviously, these are all opinions, blah, blah, blah. For me personally, I typically view the prequels as the most inferior Star Wars films, despite the story hiccups of the new trilogy. And by hiccups, I mean just complete annihilationally bad stories that they have. However, when I do these, I usually haven't weighted story as more important than these other three elements. I've usually rated them all evenly. So I'm curious if the prequels will still be considered the worst, despite story being rated more heavily than anything else. So story, acting, visuals, entertainment, which is the most subjective of these. They're all subjective. This is the most subjective. All these are worth 20%. This is worth 40. Let's go. Episode 1. Well, actually, I'll make this easier on myself. I will just go from worst to best. So the worst story goes right to episode 9 down here. He's getting 9 points right already. The next worst story of the Star Wars franchises gotta be episode 2, because it's just boring, episode 7, because that's just A New Hope again, or Return of the Jedi, or The Last Jedi. So I'm thinking the next worst story of those, I'm just gonna think which one's the most offensively annoying to watch from a storytelling perspective. And I think that gives The Last Jedi a few passes. While I don't think you're going to agree with its story by the lore, it tells its story very well, and it's an actually extremely compelling story. So that rules that out for the next worst. Rehashing a story is not the worst offense. So that's going to leave, is it boringness of Clone Wars or corniness of Return of the Jedi? I'm going to give that to Return of the Jedi. Return of the Jedi is probably a worse story because at least Clone Wars establishes a lot in its lore. And then you have, rounding out, actually, yeah, I'd say Last Jedi. Last Jedi has a better story than the rehash of Rise of Skywalker. So that means Rise of Skywalker. That means Force Awakens gets 6th, then Last Jedi gets 5th, which a lot of people will be mad about just because they're unhappy with how the story went. But the story was good, whether or not you're happy with it based on the lore. Now we get into the storytelling that's actually pretty good in the series. I would say the next best story here is probably going to be... it's between episode 1... 4 and 3. Episode 4 obviously started everything, but it doesn't mean the story was perfect. I'd say that the next best story is episode 1, which kind of restarted everything. This is where everything's good at this point, so it's kind of harder to decide. I'm just going to go ahead and give number 1 to Empire while I'm here. That plot twist of Vader is just GOAT status, and the whole movie plays out so unexpectedly in all the right ways. And the good guys don't even win, but it's just masterclass storytelling, so we're just going to give the 1 there. And then I think it would be number 3 is A New Hope, and number 2 is Revenge of the Sith. Those could be flopped, or flip-flopped. And actually, I am going to flip-flop them. Honest, I was just thinking about some of the pivotal story points of Revenge of the Sith, and some of it just doesn't make continuity sense for installments that already existed. So, for example, Padme dying while giving childbirth kind of screwed some plot holes. There's a lot of plot holes created by episode 3 that didn't need to be there, and that's a problem in storytelling, not as glaring as the plot holes in episode 4. So, that's how we're going to leave stories. All right, acting. Which one has the worst acting? Well, all 3 of these awards are going to all 3 of the prequels. This is one of the things that really hurts the prequels for me, are acting and visuals, which are pretty much going to be solely occupied by the prequel trilogy, because neither of them have good acting or good visuals. And a lot of people say, oh, the visuals were great for the time. I was there for the time, and I remember finding them to be a bit hokey even then, and I wish there was more practical effects. Not that there weren't a lot of practical effects, it just didn't matter because there was so much CG over everything. The only thing that I remember thinking looked good was Jar Jar Binks, but his character was annoying, so nobody cared. But anyway, we're not to visuals yet. Let's get to acting. Acting, the worst of the acting is definitely episode 1, followed by, actually, episode 3, and then episode 2. Episode 2 is dull and boring, but well, actually, no, I'm switching that because I'm just remembering there are certain moments of episode 3 that are acted with more decency than episode 2. Episode 2, you have the I hate sand scenes and all that. Episode 3, you have the Anakin, you're breaking my heart. They're both bad. They're both acted terribly. Star Wars is about a tender balance between space soap opera and, you know, fun family teen film, and these 3 lean so hard into the space soap opera that the acting is just abysmal. Whether deliberate or not, it just doesn't work. So now let's get to the rest of the franchise. Now, the new trilogy is actually extremely strong on the acting front, but where it gets docked is when the chemistry between characters doesn't work or doesn't make sense. And then the original 3 are very well acted, but there is a bit of corniness in especially in Empire and Return of the Jedi. Empire has Luke's reaction to the greatest plot twist of all time being, horrible. So let's see. What is the next worst acted of these films? I would say probably... it's hard. It's hard to figure this out. Because honestly, these 6 were all acted pretty well, all things considered, especially compared to the first 3. So I'd say the next worst acted Star Wars is just going to have to be the one that felt the least inspired, and that's going to be Episode 7. Because despite episode 9 being very uninspired as a film story-wise, the acting might be the best in the whole series. And we'll see if I decide that for real after reconsidering all these. But the acting in episode 9 was actually really, really good. I think it loses points because of trying to get Carrie Fisher kind of reinserted into it, and those scenes never worked. But everything else was top shelf acting, and everyone somehow seemed like they were really interested in their roles, which is more than you could say about 7, even though behind the scenes nobody was interested in their roles, so I don't know how they pulled that off. But let's see, the next best acted Star Wars then is probably Return of the Jedi, because that got a bit goofy. Then Last Jedi, and actually I'm going to switch these, because The Last Jedi has Rose, and her character is insufferable. It's not just because the acting wasn't great, and the acting wasn't great, but the chemistry just didn't work in any of that, and that's something that you could possibly try to act through, and it didn't work, so we'll switch those. Then the next better acting is probably going to be Empire Strikes Back, because Empire Strikes Back, again, has some hiccups. So now is the very original the best acted Star Wars or the newest one? And let's think to pivotal moments of character development. Luke had a lot of corny moments, a lot more corny moments accidentally. He was Mark Hamill was still a young actor, but Han and Leia and everyone else and everything else around Luke Skywalker was perfect. And then you think about episode 9 and you have the Carrie Fisher issue. because the chemistry between the characters is way better, we're going to give it to A New Hope and still give the nod to one of the few things that Rise of Skywalker got right, which was being very well acted. Now into visuals. The most boring and ugliest of the Star Wars is Clone Wars. Then you have probably Episode 1, and then Revenge of the Sith, just because Revenge of the Sith had cooler set pieces, the lava stuff, and everything else. Now, everyone else who has much better visuals, the last place of this series is going to be Return of the Jedi, especially with that god-awful special edition. If we're not counting the special edition, it wouldn't feel as ugly, but oh my goodness, that's the only version you could watch anymore without doing illegal activities, and it looks terrible. So then we go into A New Hope, which is just showing its age more than Empire or any of the other ones, especially with special edition stuff. Then you have visually, I feel the aesthetic of Episode 9 was too over the top and too much. So it actually will get outranked by one of the original trilogy, even with all of our modern advances. Then you have visually Empire. Then you have Force Awakens, and the best looking Star Wars film is The Last Jedi. It's gorgeous, and it has some of the most captivating and interesting shots in all of Star Wars. There's actually an artistic element to The Last Jedi from a cinematography standpoint that doesn't exist anywhere else in Star Wars except for possibly some of the offshoots from the main 9 saga, such as Rogue One and other TV variants. Now, entertainment. Which ones are just the most fun to watch? Now, you might think this is the prequel trilogy's time to shine, but I am not 9 years old, who seems to be the target audience of the prequels, and I was also not 9 years old when they came out, so I have no nostalgia for them to be exaggerated in entertainment value looking back. So no, this is not where the prequels shine. In fact, the prequels don't really shine anywhere. They already had their shining moment in story, and as we could see, they didn't even shine that well there because the way they told their great stories was just not always great. So we got to go back to entertainment here, and the least entertaining Star Wars film is again Clone Wars. Clone Wars is going to be the worst Star Wars film no matter what way you try to slice it. Some people might be talking about, well, what about the pit scene and the lightsaber and the blah blah. This movie is boring. It has cool action sequences, but it is a boring movie. Star Wars and boring should not go hand in hand. The next least entertaining of the Star Wars films is probably somewhere between The Last Jedi and Episode 1. You have one that's cringy with one payoff in Darth Maul, and the other one that has honestly a lot of cool stuff, but it's ruined by its overly long runtime. This is Last Jedi. Overly long runtime, plot lines that don't go anywhere and shouldn't have happened, and it's just not super fun to rewatch. Last Jedi admittedly has probably my favorite moment in Star Wars in that film, in the throne room scene that is controversial with Snoke, but that doesn't mean I want to go back and watch the movie and all of its weird political lectures and things like that, but I also don't want to go back and watch Episode 1 and all of its cringe. So these two are a toss-up in entertainment for me. So if I try to take a step back from my personal preferences and just look at the films and their pacing from a cinematic viewpoint, then unfortunately, I think Last Jedi comes out on top because despite it having sequences that didn't go anywhere and things of that nature, it is more well-rounded as a film and how it should play out, which is why it's the highest reviewed film in the Star Wars series from a critical perspective because of that. And when I think about if you told me right now I have to sit down and watch a Star Wars movie, I would choose The Last Jedi over Episode 1 because it's an easier watch. So I'm going to have to give it to The Last Jedi reluctantly for being the 7 spot and Episode 1 for the 8 spot for entertainment. Now we're going into some other stuff. I'm going to drop Return of the Jedi right here. Return of the Jedi is painfully not entertaining with the Ewoks and things of that nature. Then you have the next least entertaining, or I guess we're starting to get to the better ones after you get the first 4 out of the way. So the next most entertaining, I don't know why episode 9's still here. I kind of forgot about you. That shows your entertainment value. Hold on. Episode 9 is just excess everywhere, and it's long. Its dramatic moments are pretty well done, but that's about it. So I think we have to actually drop episode 9 here and bump up Return of the Jedi. I don't think episode 9 is as devoid of entertainment as The Last Jedi or episode 1, because entertainment, I should have prefaced with this, you're turning your brain off. Your Star Wars brain, your story brain is all off. Just, ooh, cool stuff happening. That's what entertainment means to me in this category. Like, oh, if I sit and I casually watch this, am I entertained? Does the time go by quickly? And I can say that about these films in this order. The time is so slow when watching episode 1 or 2. Episode 9 is a train wreck, but it's just like, it's visual crack, so it kind of glides by, and it does a better job of that than The Last Jedi did. All right, so then you got Return of the Jedi. Now, these are all going to be highly entertaining films, the next ones left. I'd say of them, the least entertaining is going to be A New Hope, because it's a little too slow. Then you have the New Hope reboot, otherwise known as The Force Awakens, which basically fixed the New Hope's issues. Then you have Empire Strikes Back, and I'd say it's pretty indisputable that the most entertaining Star Wars movie, when we're defining the category of entertainment as we are, is Revenge of the Sith. So, here is what we have. Now, we don't know our rankings yet. We have to take all of these raw numbers, copy them. We're going to put them over here next to our boys. And I'm going to find out with you guys for the first time, because I haven't done this before. I haven't done this way. We all did this together with you yelling at me every step. So I'm going to find out with you from largest is worst to smallest is best. Let's zoom this in excessively. I don't want to just see everything. Okay, this is as zoomed as it lets me get. 400%. Well, dang. All right, well, I guess we're going to see everything all at once and try our best not to look. So, let's sort by largest to smallest and see what's the worst to the best. The worst, episode 2. No surprise. Number 2 is episode 1. Still not surprised. Return of the Jedi ranked a lot lower than I anticipated. I know I don't like Return of the Jedi, but I didn't think it would drop this low, but mistakes were made. Ewoks exist. Then you got Rise of Skywalker. If I was just to go here and move things myself, I would put Rise of Skywalker as the third worst here. But again, I wanted to see this based on doing it this way. Now, here's something that I'm finding interesting here. You got Episode 7, 8, Episode 3, Episode 4, and Empire is the best. What I find interesting is the gaps here, though. The quality. This is why I wanted to do it this way, is because how this math would work. So higher score means worse movie. First of all, look how much worse I consider Clone Wars than everything else. And this is very reflective of how I feel about these movies. Then you have all these 3 movies are pretty much the same category of bad, and that also reflects how I feel about these 3 movies. Rise of Skywalker, Return of the Jedi, and, Episode 1, Phantom Menace. I see them all as just not great, and they're all interchangeable. Then you have these 3, which is Episode 3, Episode 8, and Episode 7, which I think are all good Star Wars movies overall-ish, but with some pretty big flaws. Episode 3, I think I would want higher than these other. I do regard this the only part of this system that I don't think worked. Episode 3, for me, is significantly better than Episode 7 and Episode 8. But it doesn't really show here, and let me go back and see why that might be. I think it's because acting and visuals, all of these being set to the same, acting and visuals is what really kills Episode 3. And perhaps we went too hard on its visuals, but again, it does suffer from some of the CG issues of the original trilogy. So maybe if we revisit this list again after another year of watching Star Wars, we might change how we weight some of these and see if it reflects my true feelings of the films closer. But in any case, just a disclaimer, I do think that Star Wars Episode 3 is further away from 7 and 8 than these scores would indicate. Then, of course, you have, in my opinion, the gold standard of Star Wars, which is in A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. A lot of people hate on A New Hope because of its slower pacing. I don't find slower pacing to be a terrible element in films if it deserves its pacing. And, there's not any big lightsaber fights and stuff like that in Episode 4. They haven't figured that stuff out yet, but I still find it to be a very satisfying space movie in the same way that I find Rogue One a satisfying space movie, even if it doesn't have as much Jedi action in it. And then enough said about Empire Strikes Back. It is the best Star Wars movie. It always will be. It always has been. If you disagree with that, I just don't care because it is the Star Wars film. Without it, we wouldn't have Star Wars like we do now. If New Hope had transitioned a different way, I don't know what would have happened with the franchise. Empire Strikes Back is Star Wars. I am your father. That's the list. We do this probably once every year or two because I always rewatch this series. Go ahead and have heated discussion in the comments. If you watched this far, make sure you subscribe to the channel and consider joining because holy crap. And until we explore again, I'll see you next time.